Hi everyone, welcome to Brothers, Sisters, Strangers video podcast. I'm Ali John Chaudhry, psychotherapist, and today I'm here with Fern, and we're going to be talking about the family myth and how to deal with the upcoming holidays. Very important themes for us today.
I'm Fern Schumer Chapman, the author of the upcoming book, Brothers, Sisters, Strangers. And I have reconciled with my brother over the last 5 years. So I bring a rather unusual perspective to all of the issues of estrangement.
It's good for you to be here again, Fern. I'm glad we can have this talk. We've been doing our sibling estrangement support group, and it's been going very well, getting active participation, and people seem to be, of course, very interested in all this, and people are hitting me up about more information about when the next one is and such. So this is going to be good, and incidentally, it's going to be in early January, so we'll of course continue on there. And so the family myth, Fern, I know that this is a topic that's been coming up. I know some of our viewers have been talking to us about this. They've been wanting for us to discuss this a little bit more. And why don't we start by defining what is the family myth, Fern?
I think the family myth is really the family identity. It is the we statements that family members put forth to indicate what are their shared values. And they expect everyone to conform to those shared values. Of course, people make all sorts of choices, and they often make choices that don't fit into that particular view of the family. And when that happens, I think often some of these family members are cast out. And it becomes particularly uncomfortable and acute at the holidays, because suddenly we have this roll call of who's in and who's out of the family. And those who have strayed from the family myth or the family identity by admitting to their own sexual orientation, or they have created an interracial marriage, or they've had a religious conversion, or they have different political views, or they have an unconventional career or an unconventional lifestyle, it all catches up at the holidays.
I agree. I think this is especially important for us to put to shed light on this, because I think that, like you say, oftentimes, people are very much into a group type of mentality, and we hear this in all sorts of media, like you were saying earlier, right? About the messages of, oh, you're getting. We hope you have a good get together with the holidays with your family and such. So there's always these type of messages that can be very difficult to hear when you start to realize that you're not part of the clique, you're not part of that in-group mentality.
Right. So you're actually feeling alienated and isolated because you don't conform to the family myth. And then externally, you're getting this message, which is, I hope you're having family gatherings, or you're getting together with your loved ones at the holidays. And of course, that just kind of twists the knife.
It does, and it's oftentimes the type of thing that of course, is painful and is hurtful for people, because again, like you say, it's a type of suffering that is not very much visible. There's only one single narrative that seems to be pushed during the holidays, and it's getting together, having a merry experience with your family. And when that's not the case with you, then it's a stark reminder that that's not what you have. And it's important for us to be able to put words to this and to actually call this out, because again, it's not everybody's reality. And for some people, as a matter of fact, it's even more difficult, as you said, perhaps because of different political affiliations, different religions, the assumption that somehow you're not going to enjoy yourself. This is what people that hold the power within some families tend to do. They make decisions saying, oh, the other person might somehow not enjoy themselves if they're here, or whatever type of mental construction they've created for themselves to justify that they're going to be pushing somebody away. So
I think it actually fits into the larger definition of estrangement too, because people in general impose their definition of what is family on all of the estranged. And that's where the stigma comes in for feeling you can't talk about the fact that you don't conform to the typical image of what a family is. And so it's interesting. It operates at a lot of levels.
Exactly. And when you think about LGBTQ people, for example, that experience already a certain sense of marginalization with society, it's even more apparent because if you're marginalized because of the fact that you're of a different orientation, different persuasion of some sort, you know, there's lots. Gender is very much on the spectrum, of course. There are different types of experiences that people have, and I really like to give out the example of how, you know, the people need to be able to dispel the notion that people are making that choice to be that way. It's not a choice. That's one of the biggest myths and misconceptions, is that people are born this way. They're not choosing to be this way. It's not a smoking habit that you're just going to want to quit, because oftentimes you hear about this, about conversion therapies and such. Well, you know, people have gone through conversion therapies. There's conversion therapies for your loved ones just in case. And it's actually been discredited by science. These are actually very toxic type of environments and atmospheres where you're actually pretending something is not there. You're taught to pretend to be something that you're not. And I mean, this is the basis for suffering, is when you know something to be true and it's not being experienced, it can actually set people up for having you know, dysfunctions and at worst pathologies. You know, so there's these type of issues that can arise if there's not an acknowledgement of differing realities for a number of people.
You know, when I think about it, I think the creation of the family myth and subscribing to the family myth is actually its own form of xenophobia. Not everybody, let me back up and say that to your point, sexual orientation is not a choice. Now, maybe an interracial marriage is a choice, but if you're judging each individual who comes into the family and not accepting because they don't fit into your view of what it should be, you know, it becomes xenophobic.
Exactly. It's a very in group mentality. There's the us and there's the them. And that's the basis of mistrust. That's the basis of actually creating alienation and the other, so to speak, if people aren't careful getting into that mentality. So it's very important to think outside the lines of being tribalistic and to actually be a little bit more open when it comes to different realities. So I hope that people will be more conscious of that with what we're doing here today, because I know that the holidays can be a particularly difficult time, and I know that you and we wanted to discuss a few strategies also.
Right. For those who are cast out.
Yes, exactly. So I know that for me on my end, you know, I've talked about different things. We've talked about the importance of planning, right? That's really important. If you have no plan, then that's not a plan. It's important that you do have a plan for yourself. And we've discussed this, of course, in the support group, notion of being able to prepare ahead of time. So that way you do have something that you can focus on and enjoy during the holidays.
Right. I think it's really important that you're not blindsided by alienation and isolation on the holiday itself. And therefore, you have to think in advance, what am I going to do? Who am I going to be with, if you can be with somebody? Or how will I spend the day?
Yes, exactly. So treating yourself, having a plan, maybe perhaps buying a book or a movie you've been meaning to see, and really setting it aside for that day. Being able to make it into your day, defining what your day can look like is very important. We've talked about different rituals also, about the importance of having certain rituals you can create for yourself. You know, I remember I talked about myself about a ritual where I walked down into the downtown square sometimes during Christmas as a means for me to have that ritual that I can do and that I can enjoy, as opposed to having to wait for people to invite me over and such, you know. So I think that that's an empowering experience.
And I think it's important this year to separate the challenges from typical years. obviously COVID restrictions apply in many areas. If you're in a hotspot, you're not going to be able to get together with relatives, or you're not going to be able to gather with friends. So what is the best way to pass those hours when you have these restrictions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much. And I like the idea of planning. I think planning is important. So do you break it down if you need to on paper? What would my day look like? When is my most at-risk time? Because it's the waves we all experience, right? It's those waves that can be more difficult for us during that time. So that way, if you have a plan for the waves of grief, the waves of emotion, then you'll know that there's something you can do during that time until the wave subsides. So
Yeah, and even though there are these restrictions, there are still opportunities, for example, to volunteer on hotlines, and even getting doing various things with different groups. You can do something
yeah, absolutely. Even phoning a
through
friend.
Zoom is what I'm saying.
Yes, yes. Phoning a friend, making a Zoom call to somebody that you think might be alone. And that's the thing. When you're focused on something outwards, like you're saying, volunteer work or something where you're contributing to something, you're not focusing as much on your own experience. And oftentimes, this is what I've seen with people that fall into rumination: is they're sitting down somewhere, and then all of a sudden, the hamster starts to go. So this is where it becomes important. When you're doing something else, then all of a sudden, you're not allowing for that process to occur as much. So it's a
And I always talk to you about the fantasies involved in all this, how everybody's life must be better. And of course, social media really feeds that.
yeah,
And so maybe you want to taper your social media exposure at this time as well, so that you don't hear and feel so much of that. But also, I think it's important to recognize that there's fantasy in all this. And, maybe you ought to really recall what it was like to sit at that dinner table with that uncle who you couldn't bear.
yes, exactly. And that's the thing too. If you're able to catch yourself, that's very, very important to be able to remind yourself of those past negative experiences and why it is things are the way they are. So that's very important also, to just reaffirm some of the choices that we need to make, and why it is that things are the way they are. Now, if you're going to be seeing family, because I know that we're almost out of time, but I do want to say, of course, if we're approaching family during the holiday season, it's not every place that's a hotspot. I would suggest in some ways asking the great question here is, what would protector do? So get familiar with this voice, until you know exactly what your protector would say and do in various situations that can arise. If you really want to kind of highlight some of the situations that have arisen based on the past, then you can ask yourself, well, if this happens, here's what I can do. If this happens, here's what I can do here. So this is a very empowering process that you can do. And I would even say, imagining there's a shield around you when you're talking with other people, because oftentimes we talked about boundaries before. Boundaries are very important. And when you think about a shield being around you, then that's a really, really important one. And I would also say, be Teflon, be like Teflon, shift the subject matter towards something else. If somebody starts to get down on you about something and they're just picking at it, and picking at it, then, you can talk and shift the conversation by saying, oh, I've been meaning to talk to you about your car, your pet, your job. Talking about other people's interests is a great deflection that can actually help to put the emphasis on something else. So this is a way to kind of handle holidays also. And if things go from bad to worse, give yourself a plan B. Give yourself an exit strategy in that way. Tell yourself that you can go somewhere else, or prepare for a place that you can go if you need to leave, because you're free at all times to do that. So very important to let people know this.
I was just saying, it's also part of planning ahead, anticipating how you're going to interact if you get into one of these situations where you're uncomfortable. So I think the word of the day is planning.
Yeah, planning is good. I think that's very, very important. So if people can remember and walk away with something, it's to plan. Plan for the holidays. Don't just let it happen. Don't wing it. Be the person you want to be, and it'll make things easier for you based on the choices you make and you plan for yourself during the holidays. So I'm just very aware of the time here, Fern, so we will need to end on this note. today. And this has been a very, very informative and insightful talk on family myth. I don't think there's that many conversations happening nowadays about this. So I really think that this is good for us to be able to do this. And again, I need to thank you again for doing this. This is great to have you here, of course.
Oh, well, it's always my pleasure. I'm always happy to do it, Ellie John, and I think we do shed a lot of light on the sibling estrangement experience.
Absolutely. So I look forward, of course, to do this again on other themes in next upcoming videos. And if I don't get a chance to see you, Fern, I'm certain that you probably have your plan, and you're probably going to, of course, navigate through the holidays in the best way suited for you.
I will. I wish you happy holidays.
Thank you so much. Likewise to you. Take care.